Without question, the psychosocial hazard that we know the most about is workplace bullying. Despite what we know about the harm that workplace bullying can cause, the behavior is still pervasive in many organizations across the United States. We'll meet one of the folks who's on the front line of trying to address workplace bullying up next on this episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each week, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk psychological health and safety. Welcome to this episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Our goal for each episode is to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. According to the National Workplace Bullying Coalition, workplace bullying is not just interpersonal conflict, it's a form of targeted abuse and a serious psychosocial hazard that threatens the dignity, health, and safety of workers. The NWBC emphasizes that bullying is an intentional and sustained kind of mistreatment. It's not a misunderstanding or an isolated incident. They describe it as a form of violence, psychological, emotional, and sometimes physical, that can mirror discrimination in its impact and structure. And it comes across as a dignity violation. At its core, bullying is a violation of a worker's right to dignity. The NWBC advocates for environments where every person is treated as a human being, not just a project or an object or a disposable resource. So I have the pleasure in this episode of chatting with one of the leaders of the coalition, someone who has their own lived experience of dealing with workplace bullying, and someone who also has some expertise in the way of counseling and supporting and consulting with targets of workplace bullying and other forms of targeted workplace abuse. And we've got lots to chat about, and I've had the opportunity to have a dialogue where I was being interviewed, so now I'm turning the tables a bit. So let's start with an introduction of my guest, by my guest, with this question. Who is Ms. Camay McClure-Dunn?
Well, thank you so much, Doctor, for that warm introduction. I have some big shoes to fill here, sitting next to you in this interview. So thank you so much for having me. To answer the question, who is Miss Camay? Miss Camay, first is a daughter. Secondly, a sister. Thirdly, I guess I would say I'm an aunt. The most coolest, fabulous aunt ever, I will just add. Finally a wife to my amazing husband. And I am a 20-year legal professional. I've worked in the law for over 20 years as a litigation paralegal. And my formal education, I do hold 2 paralegal degrees as well. And so my formal education and my professional experience have built the foundation of my consulting business, Miss Camay International, here in Las Vegas, Nevada. So I am a legal consultant, a registered document preparer. So you can imagine my vast experience in preparing documents, business documents, legal documents, contracts, et cetera, et cetera. I love what I do, and I'm very grateful and thankful that my formal education, my professional experience, gives me the knowledge and experience to help consult with the members of my community in regards to their rights under the law.
So, and we're going to get a little bit more into what brought you to where you are today. But one other question I ask, and this one is identical. Everyone who comes on gets this one, and I just love to hear the different perspectives. But what does psychological health and safety mean to you?
Oh, that is a great question. What does psychological health and safety mean to me? Well, I would initially say this. I believe that each person, each individual has has their own responsibility to their own psychological health and safety. Okay, we know where we've been. We know what we've been through. We should have a level of awareness, about our emotional state of mind, right? Our trauma, what we've survived. But at the same time, there's a caveat to it where, people that we deal with, our friends, our family, our employer, right? Coworkers, they play a role in the responsibility of that as well. But that comes with, getting to know each other, getting to a point where you care enough about your employee, or you care enough about your coworker, or you care enough about your spouse, to really understand, what is psychosocial, health and safety. That's different for everybody. And so that's my definition. That's what I would say. That's a great question.
Yeah. Well, and I asked that question really to kind of open up the dialogue. So this podcast has been around for, a couple of years now here in the U.S. And we still, I'm finding more and more people are starting to understand what it means, but it's still kind of foreign across the board when we start talking about this idea, because in our work systems, we've kind of normalized some behavior that some countries would already identify as unethical or even illegal. There are, at last check, there are about 40 countries in the world that would identify bullying as either clearly illegal or at the very least a violation of their health and safety standards. And we're not one of those. We're not. I mean, there is talk about it, but and I'm sure you'll appreciate this from a legal background. It's an interesting idea to say that you were treated poorly at work. It's very different to actually be able to do something about it. And that in the United States is hard. It's hard. It is a difficult thing to do. There are some places where it's easier than others, but there are a lot of places in the world where it's a lot easier than it is here. And so that's why I asked that question, just to get, people's thoughts about how they're feeling. And it brings us to something I said in the opening, that the one psychological health and safety hazard we know a lot about is this conversation about bullying. But we know a lot about it because we talk about it, when it happens at the schoolyard. But when it happens at work, I think a lot of people have really gotten used to it, normalized it, experienced so much they don't want to say anything about it, so on and so forth, that I don't think we've made the progress that we really need to. So in your case, what got you, so when did you start even thinking about what workplace bullying was and start to dig into it? What was there a particular situation, or were there a lot of things that caused you to come around and go like, workplace bullying is bad?
Yeah, great question. So, working in law, right? Working, now I work in insurance defense litigation. My legal career started in plaintiff personal injury, right, on the plaintiff side. And so I understand the threshold essentially that needs to be met in a personal injury lawsuit. So when somebody has been injured at the hands of someone else who's liable for those injuries, and the threshold that has to be met in order for that claim or that lawsuit essentially to have merit. Okay. And so back in 2014, I was working for Allstate Staff Counsel Office, and I was excelling in my role. It was an amazing job, amazing benefits, great company. I also started competing in pageantry back at that time, so my community service, was inspired by Allstate, because Allstate is very active in their community. They have, programs like the Purple Purse for domestic violence. They feed the homeless, and so I was thriving in my role. I had received, great reviews, merit increases, and management in that office changed after about 3.5 years of me working there. And this new, lead counsel that came in to manage the office, she was an attorney there already and was promoted. So she started bullying me. And, as you had shared, David, initially when it started happening, I really chalked up this bad behavior to, oh, she's just a new manager. She doesn't really know what a paralegal does. She's the lawyer. And oftentimes in my world, like paralegals, we know a lot of things that attorneys don't because they're the lawyer, right? So, so I was essentially just kind of chalking up the bad behavior to, she's a new manager. She doesn't really know, the processes that paralegals do here. She's just like, let me try to help her get up to speed. Let me help, educate her about how we've been doing things and these processes, et cetera, et cetera. And so what happened was somebody actually said it to me. So I was in the middle of writing an anthology. I was a contributing author in an anthology, and one of my co-authors, who has had vast experience of bullying in the workplace, her and I were spending time together, writing our chapters in this anthology. And so I was sharing with her the things that were going on in my workplace, and she said to me, "You are being bullied. You're being bullied in the workplace." And I remember, David, it kind of like sat me down, and I just was like, what do you mean bullying in the workplace? I was bullied in school, in elementary school, and, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but, you get on the playground and, one of your classmates is bullying you, and you kind of deal with it, right? You kind of set them straight on the elementary school playground out on recess, and they kind of either will keep picking on you or they'll eventually leave you alone, right? But in the workplace, it's a completely different dynamic, right? Like, I'm not going to school, I'm not getting paid at school. I'm not expected to treat people any kind of certain way. There's really not a lot of stake. What happens in school? We get suspended, right? You get in a fight or something happens, you get suspended, you get sent home for a few days. But the risk is low. The risk is very low, personally. So when you get into the workplace, now it's your job, it's, your health insurance, it's your vacation, it's your money, it's your livelihood, your ability to, have a home and, have transportation and eat, right? Buying food, essentially. So that dictates our behavior, especially when we are simply an employee and we have, a leader, a manager, somebody who's in a higher position of authority to fire us or write us up or, say we're a bad employee. That dynamic doesn't exist in schools. It doesn't. It just doesn't. And so when this, co-author started, kind of going into the topic with me and explaining to me and, relating what I was experiencing to, this topic of being bullied in the workplace. So then, as a legal professional, as a paralegal, with, at this point I've had, probably 10 years of experience, right? Working in law. And so I'm sitting there as a legal professional and I'm saying, okay, well, this person has caused me damages, this, loss of enjoyment of life, daily activities of living. These are all, aspects, if you will, of a lawsuit for, personal injury damages. So when I started to look into bullying in the workplace and in my research, it was revealed to me that it is completely legal. It was a huge conflict for me, David. Huge, because I'm working in law, and at the time it was insurance defense litigation, right? So we're defending a plaintiff suing us, right? But in my experience on the plaintiff side and working, that angle of a case, I was just distraught, I guess, for lack of better words, distraught to learn that bullying, this behavior, what I was experiencing, was completely legal. And I had no remedy. There was nothing I could do from a legal standpoint to, address this woman's behavior, and the company, the corporation, like allowing it. So that was very hard for me to wrap my mind around. It was, I questioned my career choice at the time, because I work in law because, everybody has rights under the law. And so I'm very passionate about, okay, anyone has this legal issue or has this problem or the situation, there's law around it somewhere. There's a statute, there's law on maybe on the federal level, like there's some law that's going to be relative to what's going on, but not in this situation. And so it was pretty devastating for me. Like I said, I was really questioning my career choice, and why am I working in law if this is legal, if this can happen in the workplace, especially a legal workplace, So it took some time for me to really wrap my mind around the legal aspect and how it's legal when, you look at elements of a personal injury lawsuit, and so many aspects of what I was experiencing are relative to a personal injury lawsuit. And, for me, I was just like, well, let me go find a lawyer. Let me go hire a lawyer who can sue this person and this company. And, the issue is there is no law, there is no case law that we can use, or any attorney can use, essentially, to argue my case, because bullying in the workplace is legal.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. That you have just identified the issue. Even when I talk about psychological health and safety in general, it is the same thing that you described, because although bullying is the one we know the most about, it's not the only one. So the definition that I use in my research and in my book is that a psychosocial hazard is actually in the eye of the person. It's something that is harmful to me, something that causes me to feel threatened and, causes me to, ultimately experience harm. But and again, that sounds kind of airy-fairy to some people because there aren't laws, at least here in the United States, to be able to quantify that. And frankly, I'm not in a legal profession. I don't play a lawyer on TV or anything, but I would suppose that most of the laws that we have are focused around something physical, and generally it's physical to other than a human being, and then maybe if it hurts a human being, because most of our laws, in my opinion, they're set up really well to protect the corporation, the organization. You broke my stuff, you stole my stuff. But when it comes to harming people, it gets a little dicey. I mean, it's just harder. That's the way our system is set up. And again, there are others that are not set up that way. It's a lot easier to prove that because you harm the person, it's a bigger deal. But, I think part of the reality is, even part of the healing is recognizing the system that we're in, because it's hard to fight a battle. It's hard to play a game when you don't even know what the rules are. If you get out on a baseball diamond and look for a football, you're going to be out of luck because there aren't any. Every sport has its set of rules, and if we're going to be, employed, particularly in the United States, it has a set of rules. And some of them are not really favorable to the human beings. They just aren't. And so we got to know that and try to figure out how we're going to deal with the impact. And so hopefully I don't believe you're still in that circumstance, but what's been the lasting effect of that experience and others similar in terms of work for you?
Yeah, great question. So here's the reality of it. Every workplace is going to have some bad behavior. I don't think, as employees of companies, owning my own company and being my own businesswoman, the dynamic there is very, very different, right? But when it comes to being an employee, we have to, really just know that walking into any prospective employment office, any prospective employer, that they potentially have, some bullying players that are exhibiting bullying behavior. And what I have found is the power in that. There's power in recognizing what you've been through, what you've experienced. You've experienced bad behaviors, bullying behaviors, a toxic environment. And so when we go out and venture out into life, right? We go into this workplace or this relationship, right? Because it's all a relationship. It's an employment relationship, a personal relationship, right? School relationship. It's all a relationship. So when we have had this experience and we go out into a new environment, we are able to, like that, identify bad behaviors, like within minutes, literally within minutes. Whereas, the first time that it happened, I'm kind of walking into it blindly, like, oh, everybody's fabulous here and I love everyone and the attorneys are great. And okay, give it an hour, give it an hour, right? Yeah. So, for me, something that I have learned, and this has been, over years of, addressing my own trauma from my past, adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. I've had to look at those. I've had to address those because it's real, tangible life experiences, right, that I've had. And here's the thing, when you wake up and you're living your life and you go out into life and you go into this work environment and this grizzly bear shows up, right? This bullying behavior. So this bear shows up and, you instantly go into survival mode, right? Fight or flight. And because there's this grizzly bear there, so we got to address the grizzly bear, right? So, we are programmed based off life experiences, childhood experiences. We get up every day and we go, out into the woods and a grizzly bear always shows up. It's inevitable, like it's going to happen. I can bet on it, right? The grizzly bear is going to show up. And so you begin to develop a belief system that whatever forest you're journeying into, there's a big grizzly bear there somewhere because that's what you've experienced. So there's that energy, right? The energy, the anxiety, the mindset, the mentality. We're thinking about there's a bear in here somewhere. We're saying, like I'm going into this forest. It's a new forest, but I know the grizzly bear's in here somewhere. It's just a matter of time. So we've got it in our mind. We're thinking it. Then we kind of start talking about it. And then, our physical bodies manifesting that. So we are, regardless of what forest we're walking into, we are walking into a forest where there's a grizzly bear. So we're ready to fight, like we're ready for battle. And so when you're thinking it and you're speaking it and you're physically, moving in that direction, there's no surprise that the grizzly bear shows up. because that's what we are thinking, that's what we are speaking, and then our physical body is, manifesting this experience. And it's, and I want to be clear here. I'm not blaming, I am not blaming targets for, experiencing this type of behavior. I'm not saying that it's a target's fault. I'm not saying that targets create these situations. I'm absolutely not saying any of that. What I'm saying is if you have, journeyed through life and you have these experiences with these people and these bad behaviors, and this is what you have been experiencing, it has developed and programmed this belief system within you. So it's no surprise that, we're walking out into the world and we are like, okay, where's the grizzly bear at? Because I know there's one in here somewhere.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the Flourish DX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow Flourish DX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the Flourish DX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
Well, what I'm thinking about as you're sharing this is really so powerful for a lot of targets of bullying. That, and again, I'm one of the first. I get on here, every episode and put a lot of blame and responsibility on the organizations because, and I'm not going to back away from that. Most of the responsibility is with the organization because you create the environment. But on the other hand, I have to ask myself, why do I keep ending up in the forest? So I go back onto the forest again. Why don't I go to the desert, to the mountain, to the someplace else where there aren't bears? Bears don't exist everywhere. They exist some places. Bears don't exist everywhere. So why don't I find the places where there aren't bears? Seriously, what if I know that we've all got things about us that are triggering for us, that are hazardous for us? So why go looking for more of that if I know I don't like that? You see what I mean? I got to ask myself that question because that's the part I can control.
Yeah. So let me give you an answer, right? The reason why we do it is because it's familiar to us. We tend to pick things or choose things that aren't necessarily the best or are gonna have the best outcome for us, but we choose what we despise the most and what we don't want the most because it's familiar. It's familiar. And it's subconsciously. I had a friend of mine introduce this concept to me because I've asked myself the same question. After my first workplace bullying experience, I relocated to a completely different city, completely different state. Okay, we were talking about different forests. I stopped going to the forest, right, with all the trees. I was in Washington State at the time, so we got a lot of green, evergreen forest trees up there.
Yes. I'm a native myself. I get you.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes. So I came to the desert. Okay, so I went to a different area, right? And guess what, David? Guess what? There was a bully there too. And so a friend of mine, and her and I talking about, like our marriage and our relationships, and we talk a lot about, trauma and that sort of thing, ACEs, etc. So she introduced this concept to me. And, in some therapy that she had, with a professional, that this question was proposed, and her therapist, explained this to her. You chose the exact thing that you despise the most because it's familiar to you. So when I heard that, I had to consider that, right? Sometimes in life we get feedback from people, David, and it's kind of like a new dress, right, or that new bikini, right? We got to put it on, we got to see if it fits, and how it holds up, and and some things might not fit. And so we can disregard them, but we definitely still need to try it all on, and see how it fits. And so, in addressing my own trauma that I have experienced, and this concept of what my friend shared with me, and then also in my work, my own healing work that I've done, I picked up the book The Body Keeps the Score. And so I just want to paint this, kind of similar picture. So in this chapter in the book, The Body Keeps the Score, the author talks about they did this study, and they took 6 children who experienced horrible, horrible abuse and trauma in their childhood, and took 6 children who had not experienced any trauma or any adverse childhood experiences, right? So they bring these 6 children together, and they put this picture in front of these 12 children. And the picture was of a dad essentially working in a mechanic shop with a car up on a lift, and, his son and his daughter holding some tools, and the dad kind of, under the car. And so the study was asking these 6 traumatized children what happened before the picture and what happened after the picture. And then they asked the same question of the same 6 children who had no trauma, right? So the children who experienced trauma, their narrative and their, kind of idealization of what was happening in this picture before the picture was taken was that, the dad was abusive, and the children, had these tools in their hand, and they were gonna, fight off their dad who had abused them. And one child was like, the children are gonna let the car drop on their dad because their dad has abused them. And just these horrible, horrible, like idealizations of this picture that displayed none of that, right? And then, the 6 children who had not experienced any trauma in their life, they looked at the picture, and their, responses were, the dad is teaching his daughter and his son how to fix the car because it's his business, and they're helping their dad, and, this loving, kind, beautiful, like what was happening before and after this picture was taken. So what that frames, right? And I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm not giving, any kind of medical advice. I'm just explaining, what the reading essentially has helped me with. So again, going back to the bear in the forest, right? So when you are raised in and living in this environment that is toxic, where you're being abused, where you're being bullied, where you're being mistreated, that becomes your agreement. That becomes your programming. It becomes your belief system. And so, you walk out in the world, and the lens that you look through, appears to be full of, violence. Versus if you've never experienced that, and you haven't really experienced trauma, or you don't have any adverse childhood experiences that you've survived or lived through, the lens that you look through is completely different. So, for me, I had to ask myself, okay, so I was bullied in that workplace, and I, relocated, completely different geographic area, no more forest, right? We're in the desert. And, here's this bully. Um, I left that office, went to another law office, and, lo and behold, there was another bully there as well. Um, without, kind of mentioning any names, the one of my most recent employers, I walked into that office as a new employee, and within 15 minutes, David, within 15 minutes, I identified the bad behavior culprits. literally within minutes. And so where I am now, to kind of help move our conversation forward, where I'm now is because of what I've been through, surviving being bullied in the workplace, being able to identify, the bad behaviors, the players with the bad attitudes, right? The bad behaviors. I'm always going to, as long as I am employed by an employer, I'm always going to be at risk, essentially, for having to deal with bullying in the workplace. And so, how do I deal with that now? Well, the power of PTSD, the power of post traumatic stress, knowing my trauma, knowing where it comes from, acknowledging that I'm being triggered, and then how do I navigate that? How do I respond to that snarky email? How do I report it? Do I address it? Like what are my goals? What are my goals with this job right now? What are my personal goals? Because this job is such a small aspect of my entire life. And I also realize that my employability does not rest on the shoulders of an employer. I and that's really where my consulting business started to flourish, when I finally knew how powerful I was. Like, yes, the law office I work for, yes, they're a law office, yes, they have attorneys, yes, there are other paralegals that can do the work, right? But none of them are Miss Camay. None of them are. None of them. Okay. And none of them come with my experience, my knowledge, my resiliency, my power of negotiation, So I'm able to do the work I'm able to do for my employer because of me and my experience and my knowledge and my experience. And so when we as individuals can really recognize that we are not victims here, right? We are victors. We claim victory over, it's just like us, I guess winning the lottery or going and gambling and winning, like when you understand how powerful you are as an individual and what you bring to the table. If you find yourself in an environment where you are being bullied in the workplace and there isn't really a way for you to navigate around this bad behavior or around this person, like the next employer is going to value, appreciate, respect you, and want your experience in their organization. And there's power in that. And that's what has helped me. There are bad players in every office, and I'm able to deal with them, and I'm able to, kind of move and navigate around my job and eliminate, even even like emailing these bad players, even communicating with them at all. My work doesn't involve really working with these bad players. The attorneys really work with them, not so much myself. So I'm able to, respond to my work and respond to requests or, any interaction with these bad players. I'm able to, monitor myself, regulate myself, because I have a heightened self-awareness about myself and about what's going on. Because a lot of people don't. Right, David? There are people within the organization that are like, I don't even know these people. I don't, like managers or, supervisors. I don't know these individuals. I've never worked for them. I don't manage them. So they're kind of like, like these women just can't get along, I think is what they tend to say.
There are lots and lots of people in workplaces who are, what they know is, I'm being harmed. I don't feel good, but they haven't figured out why. They they haven't identified what the bullying behavior is. They describe it as all kinds of stuff, but they don't have the language to describe it as bullying. Uh, even though you've had the experience in the past, you've had the experience of being harmed. You never really figured out why, which is part of the reason that it keeps happening. Because it's as if I go outside and I step on a nail and I don't recognize that it was a nail or something, and the issue isn't necessarily it's what kind of footwear am I wearing that keeps me getting my foot punctured by all this stuff out there. That's what protective shoes are for. Because if you work on a construction site, there's going to be nails. So that's why you have shoes that have metal plates in them so the nails won't come through. And I really enjoy what you've been describing. And I've not heard it described this way, is actually the power of the PTSD and the experience, the power in that, not the disabling, this is horrible, but there's some power in this because again, you know what happened and you know how it caused you to feel, and you can recognize it in other places because it's still out there, but you're just better prepared on how to deal with it.
Correct. And let me kind of simplify this. I know, we're kind of running towards the end of our chat today, but let me simplify it. You made a statement, why? Like, why is this happening, right? And so here's my simple take on it, David. As a woman, as a plus size, full figured woman who has competed in pageantry, I've won local, state, national, and international titles in plus size pageantry. I have, been chosen or picked, to model over the years. I'm generally well liked by most people. Like Miss Camay the model, Miss Camay the pageant queen, oh, Miss Camay is so fabulous, and we love Miss Camay, and I have a heart for people. I love human beings, and I love educating them about their rights under the law. Like, law applies to everyone, and I just love it. But, there are some people who are going to be uncomfortable with just my energy alone. Me walking into a room, as fabulous as I can be, and I can be silent, David. I can not even say a word to these people. I look back into, my workplace bullying experiences, and, these are people that I just work with. I'm not their boss. They're not my boss. But my mere presence stirs something within them, makes them uncomfortable, they feel threatened by it. They're intimidated by it. I've never had a workplace bullying experience with any man. It's never been a man. In fact, male attorneys and male, support staff, professionals, I have never had any issues with at all. Every, workplace bullying experience I've had has been at the hands of another woman.
Wow.
And I truly believe it's really as simple as, women hating other women, women being intimidated or feeling threatened by a woman. I think in my case, I'm often mistaken for an attorney because of how I speak, how I carry myself, how I present myself. I'm very confident. I'm very bold. I have a relentless pursuit of life. And, I say what I mean what I say. And I have gotten feedback that it is intimidating to other women. And I can't sit here, David, with you or anybody else and try and rack my brain to understand why. I'm a public figure. I'm a constituent in my community. I love women. I'm encouraging women to love themselves and love their bodies. And, I'm displaying myself and being the imagery of that. And, I've been a coach. I've coached other women. I've mentored other women, children, young women, the young ladies of the world, like I'm May to them. Like they come to me before their own mother, Aunt May this, and, I'm Aunt May to so many people. And so, if I spent my time sitting here asking myself why me, why me, I would never get anywhere. I would, stay in this bubble. And I think that's a victim mentality. Why me, why me? And instead, I know that I was created to do what I'm doing. This is my assignment. This is my God-given assignment, the things that I'm doing. I was born confident. I was born bold. Pageantry developed those attributes within me, understanding the power of walking into a room or an event full of celebrities, David, full of celebrities. And, I walk in and I have this crown on my head. You might be able to see I have a couple of crowns back here in the back, but, I walk in with this crown and, sash, and celebrities are like, who is she? Who is that? What is she? What does that mean? What's that title on, I want to talk to her. That is powerful. That is so powerful. And I have a lot to say, as you're experiencing right now. I have a lot to say.
Right.
So,
Right.
I stand on that I'm doing the right thing. I love people. I treat people good. I respect people. I value and appreciate people. And if that makes somebody uncomfortable, that's on them. And I cannot spend, a moment of my life, wondering. And I used to do it when I was young. I used to think, why doesn't this person like me? Or why doesn't she want to be my friend? Or, why this? And not thinking that I'm valuable, or not believing that I'm, worth something. And, that just takes you down on a rabbit hole, that has a bottom to it that, you just don't want to find yourself in, So, I don't like we could think of 10,000 reasons why somebody doesn't like you, or why somebody, is intimidated by me, or why somebody feels threatened. I don't want to be a lawyer. I've never wanted to be a lawyer. Like sometimes I have here and there, but I've decided against it. I don't want their job. Because if I did, I would do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd go get my own job. I'd make my own job. I'm not, like that's your job, sweetie. I don't want your job. I want my own job.
I'm trying to do my part and be me.
Yeah,
be who I was
exactly.
created to be.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so I think, and we get it. That's kind of where we're getting into kind of like the psychological aspect of, like these behaviors. But that's been my experience. It's always been by a female. It's always been a woman. And, they're uncomfortable with my presence. They feel threatened and intimidated by who I am. And here's the thing, and I will make this statement over and over again. I am who I am. And I am going to be who I am in all my fabulousness and all my sparkle and all my glitter. And I will never change who I am to make anyone more comfortable being in my presence.
That's right. Well, that statement there, and again, as we come to a wrap, is really, really important, because I don't think anyone should have to be something that they're not so we can accomplish something. And I think my bride and I were talking about this just recently. It's a shame that human beings can't say, I'm a human being, you're a human being. We want to accomplish something, so why should either of us have to change to do it?
Correct. Especially at work.
Particularly at work.
Yeah.
We want to get this goal accomplished, but we don't have to be different people to do it. The question is, and a lot of it starts out with identifying what we want to do, what are our common interests and goals, and then identifying what can we contribute the way we are. Not, I need you to do this, do that, and be somebody different, because if you need somebody different, Find somebody different. What you have is, we have the two of us or the 100 of us or the 1,000 of us. This is what we have. How do we do this? And how do we do this together and allow us to be ourselves while we're doing things together? I think they're both possible. And I, like you, for me, it was, having one of my birthdays. I kind of decided that I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not. This is what I am. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. And for some people, I'm their dream. It just kind of depends. But it works well for me. It works well for me. And that's the part I stay focused on and I think that's, again, some of the challenge that people are doing things that don't really work for them, and they keep trying to make it work anyway. It's not you. I'll keep doing. No, until you know who you are, know who you were created to be, and do it the way you do it, it's never going to feel right. It's just not. And that's separate and apart from the fact that there are others out there. They're feeling threatened. They're feeling the way is because of something going on with them. It's not really you. And if the two of you can't work together to work that out, then something may have to change. And that change may be me going to a different environment. We may never be able to work that out, but I've got other options. There's other places who will be perfectly happy to see me coming through the door.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's power in that. There's power in that. Absolutely. I do want to say, on the legal side of, what we're talking about, right? So, oftentimes, when I'm consulting with a target, they're in the workplace bullying environment, right? Every day they're going into that. And, oftentimes what happens, because it is legal in the country, and a lot of company corporations, a lot of company and corporations do not have the tools, resources, or people in place to address these bad behaviors, right? So what happens a lot of times is when a target initially reports this bullying behavior going on in the workplace, like no law has been broken, right, at this point. So, HR gets involved usually, and, HR is there to protect the employer. I think we all know that. It's a consensus across the table. So the bullying gets reported, HR reaches out to the bully. Hey, we've got this report. What's going on? 99.999999% of the time when this happens, bullies will retaliate, right? And retaliation is illegal under federal law. And so I want to repeat that. So oftentimes workplace bullying complaints are made and the company or corporation doesn't necessarily do anything about that behavior, but the bully is now informed that you've complained, and now they retaliate against you. And that can happen in many different ways, right? But key word here is retaliation is illegal under federal law. So that is a violation of the law. That is a law that is being broken when that happens. And so for those targets that are watching this episode who are, in the same scenario, I want you to understand how powerful you become when you have reported bullying in the workplace and your organization hasn't necessarily really addressed it or done anything, but then the bully comes back and retaliates against you for reporting them. That is illegal. It's illegal under federal law. You can do a simple Google search and it will tell you that. And now you, the target, you absolutely have a valid legal claim about what's happening in your workplace. So I want your audience, David, to understand that dynamic and really feel the power in that, the power in their position. Oftentimes, the environment still is not addressed. The company or the corporation doesn't necessarily remove the bully. But what it does is it gives that target leverage in filing an administrative complaint with OSHA or the EEOC if they are a protected class, right? And it positions that target in a place where they can potentially negotiate how they're going to move on from this situation, because you now have this bully, you reported it to the company and the corporation. The bully has now started to retaliate against you, which is now illegal under federal law. So now we have a legal claim. Now we have a lawsuit potential issue going on here. Do we like to end up there? No, David, we don't, right? Yeah, we don't like to end up there. But this exact scenario has played out for myself. It has also played out for many of my clients that I've consulted with. And the result of this power positioning, I call it, has been a severance package, essentially, putting me and my clients essentially in a position to be able to negotiate their departure. And that negotiation involves wages, insurance, unemployment claims, those types of details. So what that does is that gives a target the opportunity to move forward with the experience. They've been through this. They know what it is. They know what it feels like. But they're able to move on and negotiate, progress and moving forward with dignity, with courage, and with their own self-respect. And there's so much power in that. There's so much power in that. And that's really my message today, is that we are individuals that are powerful, and we have the power with our own understanding and our own self-awareness to be able to navigate around these very difficult, toxic, horrible work environments that, we essentially are, exposed to.
Yeah. So sometimes we find ourselves there. So if folks want to reach out to you and find out more, what's the best way to do that?
Well, just call David. Just call David.
Right. I can certainly make the connection, but if they want to do that more direct without being the with.
Yes, exactly. People can visit my website, MissCamayInternational.com. That's spelled MSCAMAY and the word international, MissCamayInternational.com. You can visit my website. You can see my practice areas. Like I said, I'm a registered document preparer, so I prepare estate planning documents, business, legal contracts. You can find me on TikTok, Miss Camay International, and you can find me on YouTube under Miss Camay International, my YouTube channel there. I've got great interviews with boss ladies around the world on the Boss Ladies Break Room on YouTube, and you guys can get a lot of information, a lot of contact, and a lot of gems and nuggets of boss lady power moves through my YouTube channel as well. But that's where they can find me. Absolutely.
Ms. Camay, thank you so very much. As we shared a little bit off air, it's taken a while to, you've been busy.
Yes.
lot going on, but it's really good to be able to get some time with you. And
thank you.
I appreciate the nuggets of wisdom that you've deposited here with our audience, and I think it's going to help someone out there. I really do. And so, if you're watching or listening to this podcast for the first time, welcome. I hope something that you've heard will convince you to come back to an episode in the future. Previous episodes of the podcast can be found at psychhealthandsafetyusa.com. You can watch, like, subscribe, or share the podcast on the Flourish DX YouTube page. And you can join the Psych Health and Safety USA movement by connecting and becoming a subscriber on LinkedIn. So until next time, stay tuned and look out for the next episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Tune in each week for new episodes of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. If you have a story or know of one that needs to be told, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to david@id2-solutions.com or go to the Flourish DX website at flourishdx.com. We'll see you next time.
Psych.